謝各位嚟臨我哋3月份嘅講座啦。咁呢個講座呢，就係香港中文大學天主教研究中心、香港教區公教部同埋檔案處合辦嘅講座。咁如果大家有留意公教部嘅廣告同埋報導嘅話呢，咁都可能會知道3月到8月呢，我哋係會搞咗一系列嘅講座啦，同埋到12月嘅時候會有一個研討會。咁而家呢，我哋就請我哋研究中心嘅主任同埋檔案處嘅主任夏其龍神父去介紹下。Welcome to today's public talk, jointly organized by the Center for Catholic Studies of the Chinese University of Hong Kong, the Concalpo and the Archive Office of the Catholic Diocese of Hong Kong. If you have read the advertisement and news report of the Concalpo, you will know that we are running a public talk series from March to August and a seminar in December. Now, Father Louis Ha, the director of our center and also of the Archive Office, will introduce the whole program to you. Welcome.
It's a word of welcome to you all. We have this very ambitious project, which needs your cooperation for almost 1 year, from now on till December, when we have the conference, and then afterwards we will have the publication of all these proceedings. So we need your cooperation in participating the lectures and the projects, writing papers, as well as if you have the ability to contribute something for this project, because we need to employ people to do that too. So if you have some rich friends who would be generous enough to do that, you're welcome. Yeah. This project, in fact, is, as Lucia mentioned, is a cooperation between the Center for Catholic Study of the Chinese University, the Concalpo, which is the Catholic Weekly in Chinese, and then the Diocesan Archives Office. So this is a cooperation between these 3 institutions, and we hope that in any a word called vicissitude, is it vicissitude of any institutions, we might continue this program. So now let us invite Father Ticosi to introduce our speaker of today. Yeah.
Good afternoon to everybody. No need to introduce Father Gianni Crivellere because he's very known to everybody. Anyway, he's a colleague of mine, a member of PIME, or Pontifical Institute for Foreign Missions. He came to Hong Kong in 1991, and he has been engaged in teaching, in researching, in publication, and so on. He has published that book, From Milan to Hong Kong, about the history of Hong Kong Catholic Church. And also he has published also another book about the Italian community, the Italian people who has been working and living here in Hong Kong since the beginning of the colony. He has been also in touch with many other institutions, academic institutions, for publication, for research, and so on. He has been in the committee for the beatification of Father Matteo Ricci, and he has been in charge of that committee, collecting all the documentation about a possible beatification process of Matteo Ricci. So he's an expert on Matteo Ricci also. Then, since last year, he has been called back to Italy in charge of the Dean of Study of our Theological International Seminary in Monza, near Milan. I welcome him for this talk about the missionary endeavor of PIME here in Hong Kong.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me well? It works. Can I use this? Yes. Fernando, can you hear? Okay. Thank you very much for this presentation. Actually, when yesterday Father Sergio Ticozzi, who introduced me, said that he was coming to this talk, I was worried. I was not really. I said, well, now I feel a little bit more anxious because you are the one who can correct my mistakes and pick up things that maybe are not actually right. But anyhow, he was kind enough to introduce me. And then here, and I'm also happy to welcome all of you here, particularly my students. I'm here now in these 6 weeks for teaching a course on theology of mission and also on the Chinese rites controversy at the Holy Spirit Seminary College. So this is what brought me back from Milan. So for them and for my students here is also kind of attending a class. And now all of you have this leaflet, this handout, which I think is very important to properly follow this this talk of mine. I say you why, because this leaflet that you have in your hand is divided in 3 parts. The first one, the foreword, is not something that I'm going to read, but something that is very important as an introduction. Please, read that. In this introduction, I say that I will talk about Italian missionaries, or better, PIME missionary in Hong Kong. Because the topic I was given was simply too large. The Catholic missionary history in Hong Kong in the 20th century is simply too large. So, and everybody, I think, expected me to focus on the topic that I know best, which is the topic of PIM missionaries, PIME, or Milan missionaries. But the fact that I'm talking about Milan missionaries doesn't mean at all that they are more important, they work more than others, or anything like that. This is out of question. This is not why I'm talking about them. I'm talking about them because you have to say something in 45 minutes, and it's better to say something clear and specific rather than to speak too general about things that already everybody knows. Okay? But not at all because they are more significant than anybody else. In fact, I strongly believe that in past accounts, the contribution of local Christians from Hong Kong specifically, or Chinese Christians, laymen, lay women, catechists, sisters, priests, was largely overlooked. Not anymore, I guess, under the leadership of Father Luis Ha, who is very much aware of the fact that the missionary history has to do with all this network. And my students from the Theology of Mission class know very well that I stress very much that our missionary vocation starts with our baptism. So everyone is in charge of this missionary task that Jesus gave to us. So no one is excluded. So this is about the foreword. And then I also mentioned about these books that also Ticozzi has mentioned. There are still a number of copies available for those who want to purchase that. And this actually not anymore, but it is about the history of Italians in Hong Kong and Macau. And I wrote a chapter on missionary history, including other Italians that worked in Hong Kong, also in Macau, including Jesuits, Franciscans, Salesians, Dominicans, and then all the sisters, of course, starting with the Sisters of Immaculate. We have here some of them who arrived in Hong Kong in 1968 that are known in Hong Kong as PIME missionaries or PIME sisters, and then many more others that now no need to quote all of them. The second part of this layout is is how I divided my talks. My talk, they said I have 40, 45 minutes. I divided in two parts. The first part is I underline three major aspects or ways for the work of evangelization done in Hong Kong in 20th century by Pime missionary, also by actually member of other societies. The three are evangelizing through creating Christian communities, small Christian communities, mass centers, and then little by little developing this community into parishes, building churches, and exercising a leadership in the church as pastors, as a parish priest. And the great majority of Italian missionaries in Hong Kong they were engaged on this kind of missionary activity. Then we go little by little. The second is evangelizing through education and formation, so schools, and also through the media, and we go through that. And the third part is evangelization through social services and charities. And there's also these three big aspects that are as far as I understand, are the major lines of evangelization in Hong Kong by Pime missionaries. Practically, I believe that most of Pime missionaries were involved with either one of these three ways of evangelizing, or maybe more than one. And then, if I have time, I would like to say something about three specific episodes of missionary history in Hong Kong, or church history in Hong Kong, which involving Pime missionaries. The one is during the war, the Second War, with Bishop Enrico Valtorta, and the situation that he found himself quite difficult. It was a difficult days for everyone in Hong Kong. In fact, many people died in those days. And then another is the release of Bishop Bianchi from detention in China, and when he came to Hong Kong. I used this most dramatic day in Hong Kong diocese. Maybe there were more other dramatic days, but this was how the Sunday Examiner described the day when Bishop Bianchi came back from detention. And the third episode is the entitled change of leadership, when Hong Kong church was passed from Bishop Bianchi, from Pime leadership to Chinese leadership, and to the first Chinese bishop of Hong Kong, Bishop Francis Shi, that was originally from Shanghai, who became the first bishop of Hong Kong. The Pime missionaries are important in Hong Kong because, for some reason, in 1868, Hong Kong mission, that those days was called prefecture, and then in 1868, and then in 1874 became apostolic vicariate, was entrusted to the care of the Milan missionaries, the missionary from Milan, Foreign Missions of Milan. This was the original name of Pime. Then it changed later on, for some reason, into PIME. And then the third part is a gallery of Italian missionaries in Hong Kong. Here I put down the name of the missionaries that you will see projected in this screen. And you also have the Chinese name of those missionaries. So little by little, when I talk, I say something, you can see the man that I'm talking, the missionary I'm talking, and in case you want to know his or her, in one case is also a missionary sister, want to know his or her name, you just look into the paper. I didn't want to make really a PowerPoint, but simply a full, because I thought it was more, with this kind of screen, it was more effective. Okay, now yes, but I wanted to take off this, okay, very well, thank you. Okay, this was a kind of long introduction, but we know already what I'm going to say. So if somebody wants to leave, actually, there is not much left to be said. Okay, this is the first man who Pime, or better, the foreign missions of Milan, who came to set foot in Hong Kong, April the 10th of 1858. Hong Kong Catholic Church was already started much earlier, but he was the first Milan missionary who came to Hong Kong. He came by himself, coming from Singapore, and his name is Paulo Reina. He stayed in Hong Kong very, very little, and then actually we are talking about 20th century missionary, so this is still 19th century. Stayed too little because he got sick. He was already sick. He got even sicker. He has to retire in Italy, and in fact he died young. And then the second man is Bishop Timoleone Raimondi. This is the first Italian bishop in Hong Kong, the first apostolic vicar. He was not the first leader, because before him there were other leaders, including one bishop being at the head of a Hong Kong mission. This color is not original, of course. Anyhow, this man has a very important influence in Hong Kong, because he was at the beginning of the Milan missionary in Hong Kong, and he was responsible for starting many of these activities in Hong Kong, including building the cathedral. He was the one who started he was not the one who actually followed the work and completed that, but he's the one who started the cathedral, though they told him that the cathedral was going to be built too far away from where the people live, because of that hill seems to the people, and they said, no, this is going to become the center of the city, which actually happened. And also, he was very much concerned for education of the kids in Hong Kong, so this is the one who traveled all over Europe to find somebody to run Catholic schools here in Hong Kong, and he was the one who called the LaSalle brothers. We have a LaSalle brother here, so this is the man responsible for calling him. Now, this is the map of Hong Kong Apostolic Vicariate and later Hong Kong Diocese, until the communist takeover of China that confined the Diocese of Hong Kong only to the colony of Hong Kong, so to speak. As you see, I'm sure most of you are aware of that, Hong Kong Diocese originally was much, much larger than the present-day diocese. It included 3 districts from the continental China, Ho'an, Waiyeong, and Hoi Fong. So the Pime missionaries also worked not only in the British colony, but also worked in these 3 districts. After the 49 and then the communist takeover, and little by little, all of them, they were to come back. So Bishop Bianchi, we talk later about him. He worked in Hoi Fong. This is where he worked, and then he was kept prison in China. I can't remember the place where he was kept in detention, and then he was allowed to come back to Hong Kong. This is important because this is also part of the history that sometimes is not properly acknowledged. Okay, this is the book that it was written about the history of Hong Kong. This is, I like this picture very much, because this is the first picture in existence that we have about Pime. When I say Pime, I should say, in fact, Milan missionaries that we have. This picture was taken in 1900. So it's exactly at the beginning of the 20th century. And the man here on the chair, I mean, he was not dead. He was still alive. On those days, dead now, since long. But he was still alive. But he was in Italy for the Holy Year. He's the bishop, the second bishop in Hong Kong, the second Italian bishop, at least. The second apostolic vicar. His name is Luigi Maria Piazzoli. You have the Chinese name there. And who was a successor of Bishop Raimondi. One thing that now we know all the names of these missionaries because we have done some research. As you can see, some missionaries have their head shaved, and in fact they are wearing the tail, hair tail on their back. And others, their hair is just normal, you know. I guess you can understand why some they have to shave their heads and some not. Since I said earlier then the territory of the mission was much larger than Hong Kong, these are those who were working on China under the Qing dynasty. So they have to shave their heads. It was a Manchu custom. And so this you can see, this were coming from there. The other were working in Hong Kong under the British rule, so they didn't need to shave their head. So this is Father Spada, and then this is Taverna, who later went to Macau, and now there is a street named after him. And this is Pozzoni. He will become the following bishop, Domenico Pozzoni, the one who holds okay, this is the cathedral that I was talking earlier that was constructed under the order of Bishop Raimondi. In fact, the men who follow, etc., were other Burghignoli and the other missionaries who actually were there to build this cathedral because Raimondi was traveling all around the world. In the old days, maybe some of you are not aware, there was a bell tower next to the cathedral, actually quite beautiful one, that was taken down, as far as I understand, to allow space and have material for building the Raimondi College. Now, it's more or less where now we have the Raimondi College. Okay, this is the cathedral. Okay, now, remember that this Father Lido Mencarini, some of you might remember him. If you read the gallery, you find also his Chinese name. So I was telling in the first part of my presentation, which actually is very simple, say that first of all, the Milan missionaries in Hong Kong, they worked as leaders creating Christian communities. In 19th century, they were itinerant missionaries. They went from one village to the other. They continue to do that. But especially what they were able to do best, as far as I can judge, is to create Christian communities. So through the help of their collaborators, many of them were Chinese priests, Chinese sisters, catechists, men and women, following them, helping them, and baptizing people, introducing to the Christian doctrine, giving them the Christian doctrine, introducing them into the Catholic life, baptizing them, and then giving instruction, offering the other sacraments. And Father Mencarini, although is not from the beginning of the 20th century, in the second part of the 20th century, he was, as a vicar general, he was responsible especially for this policy that I think was very important. After the Second World War, with a very large influx of refugees from China, many schools were built in Hong Kong by the government, but some of these schools were built in collaboration, so to speak, with the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church was the sponsoring body. And therefore, there was an agreement where inside some of the schools, there were halls that can be used on Sundays for celebrating the Mass. The influx of people was so large that it was not possible to build churches, and maybe there was not even space to build independent churches, traditional churches everywhere. So the policy was to create, even some schools is still like that now, to build churches, not really churches, but halls, rooms that were used by the priest to celebrate Mass on Sundays, and even on the last floor, generally was the 5th floor of the same school, there was an apartment of some rooms offered to the priest to live there. And then so the priests were at the same time, more or less, with many exceptions, supervisors of the school and also parish priests of a certain territory. This policy, I think now is not possible anymore, but this policy that lasted for several decades was very important for promoting evangelization here in Hong Kong. And Father Lido Mencarini was very much involved, was one of those who were responsible for this policy. In this picture, we see him visiting a squatter area with, refugees. Probably this is popular houses that were built right after the Second World War to welcome the larger number of people coming from the China mainland. And this is another priest, Father De Maestri, Francesco De Maestri, who is simply, as we see here, is giving a blessing to a group of Christians. I put this picture of him here. He's not very well known because he stayed in Hong Kong only a few years. He died tragically for an accident, a domestic accident. But this is a description of what most of the Pime missionaries did in Hong Kong, which is serving, as I said, in the parishes, and creating communities and offering catechism, sacraments, and religious assistance to the people. This is Father Antonio Riganti, who was a Vicar General, who was in charge of the diocese when Bishop Bianchi was detained in China. Antonio Riganti, who was a parish priest, but also was a musician. Some of the songs still sung here in Hong Kong by Catholics, if you look at some, and not all, not many, but some were written, music and words, by him. This is a nice picture. Some of these pictures are also in the Pime House. If you come to the Pime, a beautiful Pime House in beautiful Clearwater Bay, on the stairs, along the stairs, you see some of these pictures. This is a choir, all women, and then they all play an instrument, a guitar. I think this is a mandolino, we say, mandolin, unless I'm mistaken. I like this picture very much because he's surrounded by so many beautiful and, I suppose, talented girls who are playing music. And the hymns, because again, this was part of the liturgy. The Pime missionaries, the Milan missionaries work very much, especially in the parishes, in the churches, celebrating beautiful liturgies and preparing people. This is, I don't know, maybe you don't recognize. This is Father Angelo Lazzarotto. Actually, all the people that are in this picture, they are not alive anymore. But Lazzarotto is not dead, he's still alive. He's 94, 95 years old in the home for the aged that we have in Milan, in Lecco. This is our former General Superior, Father. Why I put the picture of Lazzarotto here? He was a missionary in Hong Kong for a number of years, and he is one of the greatest experts on China, because Lazzarotto introduced in Hong Kong the Focolare movement. And then this is also one way somehow of evangelization that the Pime missionary adopted here in Hong Kong. They introduced, or together with other, we have, for example, the Legion of Mary, we have the Young Christian Workers, and we have now the Focolare movement, which is many people belong to that. And then we have especially Father Commissario who supported that, etc. But the first one who brought this to Hong Kong in the early 50s was exactly Father Angelo Lazzarotto. This is also one of the way of evangelization. Now, I put 3 or 4 missionaries that were well known in Hong Kong in their days. Now, maybe for many of you, those who are younger, maybe they don't know. Anyhow, this is Father Carmelo Orlando. He was, for many years, parish priest in Santa Teresa, correct? Yes, especially Santa Teresa. And this is a Boy Scout, and then he was very popular priest in his days. Many people looked up to him and he was he also had a very charming personality. They said that when he take a taxi, before the ride was over, the taxi driver was convinced to receive baptism. He was able to convince everyone to say, why you don't come? I'm a priest, why you don't come to the church? And said, this is what they say that he was able to do. This is in the early days. His name is Father De Angelis, of course. Father De Angelis was a parish priest for many years in Chim Sa Choi, Rosary Church in Chim Sa Choi. He was here. We don't have he's reading a newspaper, quiet in his early days. I was famous as a preacher. They said that I never met him. He died before I arrived in Hong Kong. But they said that he was a look-after preacher. He was able to preach very. They liked the way he preached. And also, different thing from Father Orlando. Father Orlando will bring anyone to baptism as long as they have a little hope that he will become. He was much stricter or more strict. That only those who went through the catechism properly and then they have shown to know the catechism will be allowed to receive baptism. So Orlando and De Angelis in the 50s and the 60s, probably also in the early 70s, were 2 major, very important, very well-known parish priests in Hong Kong. They were in Kowloon, one in Santa Teresa Church and one in Rosary Church, which are still 2 of the very important Catholic churches that we have now in Hong Kong. This is Father Luciano Alletta. He spent his last years of his life at the Pime House in Clearwater Bay. I also was there, so I met him. I know him personally. He's originally from Sicily. I liked him a lot. They said that when he was the parish priest, he was parish priest in Diamond Hill, in a church that now has taken away, has disappeared. When there was a young assistant parish priest that went to work with him, they did not last too long. Not that they died or they were poisoned, but they said that he was very strict. It was not easy to work with him. I found that quite incredible to believe, because when he was in his old age, he was very nice man, very nice, very easygoing, very kind. Sometimes I celebrate Mass in the afternoon by myself, because in the morning maybe I slept because I worked during the night, and he always assisted my Mass He was served. He always to take communion with me. So I think it was good. It was very nice. And the people in Diamond Hill, I remember I met several Catholics there. They will remember him very nicely because they say that he knew the names of everyone. He was someone who really visited every single Catholic family and learned about their story and their life. So Father Luciano Alletta. And I don't know whether lost in these trees, whether you can recognize Father Antonio Garaventa. It's this one. These are kids on this tree. Antonio Garaventa here you see in shorts. In this, it's very unlikely that he will dress like that because he was very old-fashioned, old traditional style. He was the one who founded the church in Saint-Shui, yes, in Saint-Shui. And then in Saint-Shui, the church that you see there now, it was built by him practically. And then the last year of his life, he served as a hearing confession at the Rosary Church. And then he also wrote poems, etc. He died not too long ago, and he spent his last year, so I knew him very well, and I like to remember him now here. And then this is a small picture, unfortunately. This is Father Lambertoni, Adelio Lambertoni, Lampaton, something. And this is Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa came to Hong Kong. She was not a missionary here, but she came to Hong Kong. And then this is also Lambertoni was very, very popular in Hong Kong. Many people knew him. He also kind of adopted a number of children that created some sort of family that is still, you know, they still consider themselves as brothers and sisters, and they still meet and get together. This is he worked especially in the last year of his life. He was in Jingwan, in the area of Seclay, as a parish priest there. This is Father Ferrarese. Father Ferrarese. He was for many, many years was a parish priest in Chengyi, and before Chengyi, other churches. And he also was a parish priest. I mean, all these people I'm showing now, there's a number because some of you might see them. And also I choose the picture because of, for example, this is I like this picture. It's among, you know, house, a home, I mean, a residential home for popular homes for people. And then I guess this is in the 60s. And he also passed away. He also was a parish priest. Okay, this is the first part. The second part I would like to introduce is about education. The first part, parish priests, people working in apostolate, the apostolate of the liturgy, and so. The second is about education. I put the picture of Monsignor Pozzoni, Domenico Pozzoni, because somehow he was close to the University of Hong Kong. He was member of also the board of governors of the University of Hong Kong when it was founded. And he also promoted education in Hong Kong. And Hong Kong has many Catholic schools, I think about 300, which is a large number. And then, however, I found that it's unfortunate that until a few years ago, there was not a Catholic university. I always, I mean, this issue should be probably investigated better than I did. I know that in 1970s, Father Fernando Galbiati tried to investigate the possibility to create a Catholic university, and then his investigation has failed. It's true that the PIME were very much involved in primary schools, secondary schools, of course the other schools even more, but I found unfortunate that a city like Hong Kong, a diocese so important like Hong Kong, does not have did not have a Catholic university for a long time. We have a Catholic university in Macau, in Taipei, there was in Beijing, there was in Manila, everywhere, not in Hong Kong. I don't know whether it has to do with the fact that Pime missionaries liked more to work on the churches and the parishes rather than in schools. Maybe it has to do with that. Pime missionaries are Milan missionaries. They come from Milan. Milan is the economic capital of Italy. People there like to work, not to study. I mean, so maybe it has to do with this, but maybe I'm making too a simplistic. Certainly, we did not have that. Now, fortunately, we have the St. Francis University. Hopefully, also we had other university here. Anyhow, he was involved with, not with the birth, but anyhow, with the early days, or not with the foundation, but the early days of the University of Hong Kong. This is Father Nicola Mencarini, Maestrini, no, Mencarini, sorry. Now, of course, I know it's Maestrini, of course, together with John Wu. John Wu is a Chinese intellectual who wrote about Teresa of Lisieux. Maestrini, sorry, was instrumental in bringing this man, who was an important politician and scholar, into the Catholic faith. He was already Christian, he was a Protestant, and he was Maestrini, I don't know why I say Mencarini. Maestrini was founded important, in terms of education, found important instrument for apostolate, printing apostolate. The Catholic Truth Society was founded by him, and also the journal Sunday Examiner, who is still in existence, was founded by Father Mencarini. And the Sunday, the Concaupo, that we have Concaupo people here, was founded by this missionary called Granelli, Andrea Granelli. Then, again, talking about culture, education, etc., which involves a smaller number of Pime missionaries, because the greater number were involved in like liturgical and church-like work, was Father Raffaello Maglioni. Here is a nice picture here together. This is Lorenzo Bianchi. This is the one who will become the Bishop of Hong Kong. They seem like they are taking picture of each other. You know, they both have a photographic machine, a camera, both of them. Raffaello Maglioni has he was a archaeologist. He also was in China, in Haiphong, and then he liked to find artifacts, you know, on the ground, on tombs, also in tombs, etc. Anyhow, he is a self-taught archaeologist. He learned by himself. He studied by himself. He also was a kind of linguistic, and he did other things. And then he brought back to Hong Kong a huge amount of potteries, artifacts, etc., that he found in China. He started to go to international symposium about archaeology, and they brought all this material to the St. Michael Cemetery. And then most of the Pime missionaries find that annoying, said all that stuff, you know. He doesn't even have a place to put that. So, and then when he died, they didn't know what to do with that. Actually, Bishop Bianchi, this one, when he died, Bishop Bianchi has the intuition of giving all this material to Hong Kong government. And maybe because he wanted also to, you know, to be nice to the government and to, anyhow, he gave to the government, which was a very smart move, because the archaeologists of the government find out that the material was very precious, very important, very meaningful. And now is part, there is a section in a Hong Kong Museum of History in Tsim Sha Tsui who has named after him. the Raffaello Maglioni collection. And a few years ago, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, there was an exhibition dedicated to him, devoted to him and to these artifacts. So even if in those days his work was not really very much appreciated, he left a very important legacy, I think. This is a bishop, the apostolic delegate in China, before Costantini, Celso Costantini, you can follow. Before going to China, he came through Hong Kong, and he's the one who introduced the localization and somehow the enculturation. He's responsible for, he said that in China, in Hong Kong, Christian art should look Chinese rather than European, to make long story short. So now I have to conclude. So he ordered the construction of 2 regional seminaries, one in Hong Kong, this is what is called now Holy Spirit Seminary College, but in those days it was called a regional seminary for the South China Diocese. It was built under the policy of Costantini. This is in Chinese style. This is a picture that I like very much. This is a Canossian sister. The Canossian sister arrived in Hong Kong very early, in 1860, very, very early. They were called by Milan missionaries, although when they arrived here, there was no one welcoming them, fortunately. And they immediately worked with education. Even now, the schools run by the Canossians are one of the most prestigious, many important Hong Kong women, including the present chief executive, studied in the Canossian school, run by the Canossian sisters. And also they run orphanages, and then they started the Canossian Hospital. This is Sister Giovanna Magni, as I mentioned earlier. She's a sister of the Immaculate Sister, the so-called Pime sister in Hong Kong. The sister arrived in 1968. We have the superior, Sister Luigia, and the former General Superior. And this picture was taken for the book about the Italians in Hong Kong and Macau. She was taken just before she got sick, and then she had to go back to Italy, where unfortunately she passed away. She worked for 2 years. At the beginning, she was a teacher at the Paul VI school that is run by the Immaculate Sisters. I have a good memory of her. This is why I wanted to put here. This is Father Lerda, because now we introduce in the third topic of and then we go quickly toward the end. The third way of evangelization is through services to the poor, to the needy, and through to charities. Caritas Hong Kong is very important. It was not founded by a PIME, it was founded by a German priest called Wath. But after this German priest that founded Caritas, for many, many, many years, the leader in Caritas Hong Kong, which became a huge enterprise. Many people, Hong Kong people, nearly know better Meng Oi, the Caritas, rather than the Catholic Church. As a name, it's more familiar. And it's also due to this PIME priest, Francesco Lerda. And then another priest who served with the poor and with the needy and with the sick and with the persons with disabilities is Enea Tapella, who died young for a street accident incident. He was one of the first, or maybe the first, PIME missionary who started to work with people with disabilities. He started in small things like home, together also with the sisters of the Immaculate, together with some of them. And later on, Father Bonzi continued the work and founded the Huiling, not the Huiling, the Fong Ho Vui Society, the Society for the Home for the Disabled. But at the beginning, there was this man. Here is giving some foods to the refugees. I believe these are children of the refugees because you see, they need food and stuff. He was a very simple man. I think he was a saintly man. When he died, it was really a tragedy, and many young people volunteered to give blood because he was for a few days between death and life, and they needed a lot of blood because he lost a lot of blood in the transfusion. And then even if not many people noticed about him before, so to speak, including Pime missionary who did not have a high consideration for him, somebody wrote in his obituary that he didn't speak any good language, not even Italian, which I think is. But anyhow, when he died, the Hong Kong Journal said that never was seen in Hong Kong a missionary who has commanded such affection by especially young people. Here you see him with the young people following him. So this Tapella, I think, if I have to choose a missionary that best represent the Pime missionary, I would choose Tapella, although I had never met him, but I think he was a good missionary. This is a brother. The Pime have priests and brothers. Brothers Luigino Brambilla. Again, it's about charities. So these are the third. This is about, again, a picture show the work they have done with refugees. And this is Father Brooks. He has a British last name. He was Italian. His father was a British soldier. His mother was Italian. This is Sunday Examiner. This picture is 1963 because we checked when Archbishop Sleepy was released. This is Father Mario Marazzi. He's still alive. He's a young Marazzi. And this is Brooks. Father Brooks was called the Saint Francis of Hong Kong because he helped poor people, especially in the people who are really poor, like street sleepers, mendicants. They say that they even took advantage of him. But he was famous for this. Okay, these are the three. In the last few minutes, I will talk about the three episodes important, but without making much long comments. These are the three major ideas that I want to convey this afternoon. Pime missionary works for evangelization under three main waves. Creating Christian communities and leading Christian communities through education and prints and other cultural activity, and through services to the poor. And then this is Father Amelio Crotti. I don't know. I found this picture. I never saw this picture before. I saw 2 days ago doing some research for this talk. He also was here in Hong Kong. He's one of those men who came from mainland China after the communist takeover. We had Pime had missionaries also in North China, in Henan province. They had to come to Hong Kong to continue to work. One of them is Father Amelio Crotti. He's very young here. I like this picture because he's among women. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 women. We don't see often missionaries with adult women in such a nice pose. And then this is him. Then he went back to Italy. He founded the missionary center in Milan, which is now the most important center that Pime has in Milan. So this is Father Teruzzi, the one who died, who was killed. Okay, this is the map of his last days in Sai Kung. I have to skip this. He was killed during the war by communist guerrillas, but no, he was not the only one who was killed on those days in the area of Sai Kung during the war. There was also at least one Chinese priest who was killed, Father Renato Squawk, and a number of catechists. So sometimes they said they killed him because he was Italian, allied with the Japanese, etc. But in fact, also a number of Chinese Catholics were killed on those days. Okay, these episodes, very briefly. This is the day when Bishop Lorenzo Bianchi, the last Italian bishop of Hong Kong, was released from China mainland. Was released from China mainland. It was October 17 in 1952. It was a very emotional day. I mean, we were not there, so, but from the report that we read. So this is on the ferry from, so this is the ferry, yeah? This is from Tsim Sha Tsui, so he arrived by the train from the new territories to Tsim Sha Tsui, and then from Tsim Sha Tsui to Hong Kong, he was brought by the ferry. This is Father Liberatore, this is Father Riganti, the musician. These are all journalists, this woman interviewing him. Okay? In the morning, he was still in China. They put the dress on him when he was in the train. They arrived, and then he arrived in Hong Kong, and he was brought to the cathedral chanting solemn Latin songs as a sign of jubilation, and Tu es Petrus, you are Peter, and sign of thanksgiving also for a man that many were afraid that he will never come out from China or will die in the detention, but he was free. He was, you know, this is Ambrogio Poletti with a policeman. He's called the doorman of China, because Ambrogio Poletti was a parish priest in Fanlang, and there was, you know, between Hong Kong and Shenzhen, there was a bridge. So you have, during those days, and now it's completely different. The people who were released from China, they have to cross the bridge, and when they said, I am a priest, they will call Ambrogio Poletti, that will acknowledge whether or not he was a religious person. And then Bianchi was dressed not like a bishop, but like a poor man, and was very, said, I am the Bishop of Hong Kong. The policeman did not believe him, so he called Poletti, and to make sure that he was really the Bishop of Hong Kong. He was the Bishop of Hong Kong, so he took the bishop in a motorcycle, and then they put him on a train, etc. This is was an interesting day. This is the Bishop Bianchi, the man who was free. He's not here in his pajamas. This is light summer clothes. This is Father Cozzolino. He's playing cards. He's smoking a cigarette. You know, he was a man easygoing. I think he was a good bishop. Many people have wonderful memories about him. He also welcomed many other communities come to Hong Kong, and his leadership was as far as I understand, with some exception maybe, he was really simple. He was a man of simplicity, very approachable. And then he went to the Council Vatican II, Bishop Bianchi, and the Council Vatican II from 61 to 62, actually, to 61, to 65. He changed there, so to speak. He realized that it was time to retire and to let local clergy to become leaders in Hong Kong. He realized that. In fact, historically speaking, it was already too late. It should have done much earlier. But this man understood that only after participating in the Council Vatican II. So he came back to Hong Kong, and he asked to have an auxiliary bishop. It was Francis Xu, the first Chinese bishop of Hong Kong. He said, with Paul VI in Hong Kong, because as you might remember, a pope visited Hong Kong. It was Pope Paul VI in 1970 when Bishop Xu arrived in Hong Kong. So in 1969, Bishop Bianchi left Hong Kong. This is the day he left. This is the boat that is leaving Hong Kong. Between 1607 to 69, there are 2 years. Francis Xu first was appointed auxiliary bishop in 67. Then in 68, Bishop Bianchi resigned but he was not appointed immediately as a bishop. He was appointed as apostolic administrator. Even now we have apostolic administrator, Cardinal Tong. And many people in Hong Kong was unhappy about that, because it seems like the Holy See, the Vatican, was not yet sure that there was a time for it seems like they bought more time to see how this bishop will do. But finally, after 1 year, more or less, or less than 1 year, he was chosen as the first Chinese bishop in Hong Kong, and formally the third bishop of Hong Kong diocese, because Hong Kong diocese started with the Bishop Valtorta. I miss talking about Bishop Valtorta now because of time constraint. So this is the last picture. So it's also, I finished my presentation with this picture. This is Bishop Bianchi, and this, of course, is Cardinal Hu Zhengjong. Here they are in Lecco, in the home for the age of Pime. I like this picture. I also put in because, first of all, these two people, they knew each other. Bianchi was a teacher of a young seminarian, Hu Zhengjong, back in China in 1940s. So there was a personal relationship among them. And they represent this change of leadership, you know? And the fact that the Pime missionaries, they have this idea. We found a local church, and then we leave the church to the local priest. In fact, they should have done probably earlier than that, but anyhow, it was done. And then this picture represents this passage of transition from Italian leadership to a Chinese leadership. And with this, I also end my presentation. Thank you very much.
咁而家我哋有啲時間咧，可以大家提問啦。咁好難得柯神父喺度。You can ask questions to Father Gianni, and yeah, this is a rare occasion for him to be here.
Yes.
Can I ask, are your classes on the theology of mission open to the public?
Say again, I didn't.
Are your classes
Oh.
open to the public?
I'm not really sure. First of all, we finished today the last class. Now there's only examination waiting for the student. But you have to register, I think, with the school, the Holy Spirit Seminary College. They are open, but not open in the sense like here you can enter. You have to register and then welcome next time as an auditor. Yes?
Father John, can you share something about the female fathers' mission today, nowadays?
Okay, thank you for your question. And the lady who asked the question is Alessandra. She is the head of the Italian Women, Association of Italian Women in Hong Kong. They do a lot of good charity work. And some of the Pime missionaries, they also do this kind of... so now the Pime community in Hong Kong is made of 30 people. In the history, as you see in the paper, there have been 212, I think, Pime missionaries who work in Hong Kong. Many of them only for a short time, especially at the beginning. You know, it's not like all of them, they were left a lasting impression in Hong Kong. Many of them stay here and then for some reason left. Now they are around 30, and some of them are not young anymore. You know, I mentioned Father Marazzi before, but he's still active, still hearing confession and meeting people. And another novelty, change is that it's natural for us to associate Pime missionary to Italian missionary to use. Now we cannot do that anymore because the young people, especially the young in our community, they are not Italian. They are Pime, so they are members of our society, but they are not Italian. They come from India or from Myanmar or from Thailand or from other countries, they come. For the rest, we do not have any responsibility in the diocese that is more than other society. We are simply one of the communities in the diocese, one of the many others, there are several, and we contribute to the work of the society. So I think that still the major work that the PIME are doing now in Hong Kong is working in the parishes as parish priest or assistant parish priest. I think the majority of our missionaries, they're still doing. So they learn Cantonese, and they work with the people in the parishes. I think this is on DNA of the PIME, working as pastors, the great majority are doing that. A number were involved in China mission, so to speak. I mean, there's no mission in China mainland, but we have presences, people who were in China for a period of time, longer or shorter, either teaching or simply being as a student or doing other meaningful work for people who are disabled or other things, or teaching in the school, etc. So a number of them, they were involved in this period. Although this China thing is always difficult in the sense that you can stay for a long period of time and then suddenly you cannot go anymore, and then you have to wait to return. Yes. So a group, and the other, a smaller group are engaged in other services like for charities, for example, or for refugees, in working for justice and peace. Some are involved in teaching. So this is more or less is the same. The number is diminished, and then also we cannot associate PIME to Italian missionaries anymore. Little by little, has become an international society, so which is okay, of course. Then. Okay, thank you for your question.
Well, everybody's shy. Can I make another question?
After this woman, yes.
Please go ahead.
Father, how much do these prominent people that you showed us just now put the weight on praying, the spirituality side?
Well, I think, as far as I can say, I think most of them did do that. I mean, they were...
In proportion.
Sorry?
They are doing a lot of things.
Yes. But they, generally, the missionaries, they had a schedule that we start with morning prayer, before they will wake up. Unlikely me, they wake up very early in the morning and then spend time in morning prayer, saying the rosary, celebrating the Mass, saying the breviaries. And then some of them, they are obviously more into a life of prayer, For I have in mind some of the missionaries, like Father Arnoldi, for example, who is still alive. Is clearly a man that we spend a lot of time in the chapel praying. Father Marazzi is also one of those men who did do the same.
Evangelization be about the ultimate goal of it is a relationship with God.
Yes, sure. A relationship with...
This seems to be diminishing. So everybody talks about education, charities, other things, but not the relationship, a genuine relationship.
This is what they did. This is what they did. I mean, when they... what they do is exactly this. When you prepare a liturgy in the Mass, a beautiful liturgy is about meeting with God.
So you're not nice celebrating Mass anymore.
No, I will not make this generalization, which is making justice of those priests that, I didn't never meet a missionary who really had not a personal life of spirituality, and they also helped people to live their life in spirituality. And then also if you are involved in education, etc., it's because this is what we are called to do. Jesus also was a man that educated people and served people and healed those who are sick, etc. So I think they have done that. Be reassured that they have done that. Don't worry. No, because they are missionaries. I mean, if we talk about monks and Benedictines, etc., certainly we talk about a life completely spent in a monastery to pray many hours a day. But here we are talking about missionaries. They have to go and preach. Yes. Yes, I remember him. Yes. Actually, here I show only few missionaries, not because the one I left are less important or less. Either you don't show anyone or you show at least. It's a very arbitrary choice that I made upon my own. Yes, I remember Peter Vino. Yeah. Father Gambaro, another. Yes. For example, one of the things that many Pime missionaries did, even now, is hearing confessions. They spend a lot of time because they believed very much in the sacraments. You know, Father Garaventa was one of them. He heard confession for many, many hours. He was so, I think he felt very comfortable, good with himself when he could hear confession of people. And during this confession, certainly they would lead souls to God. I'm sure about that. Alessandro, no. You can ask me a question privately, Alessandro. Okay. I thank you for this question. She asked me about the Second World War and during the Japanese invasion, because it's one of the topics that I overlooked, but it was actually on the outline that I proposed. It was a very difficult time for Hong Kong because remember that the Bishop of Hong Kong was Monsignor Valtorta, Bishop Valtorta. He was an Italian. Now I have to talk about politics, but I will be very brief. He was an Italian. The Italian government was allied with the Japanese. The Japanese invaded China. So this was a very sensitive, and Italy declared war against Great Britain, England. And Hong Kong was under British Empire. So politically speaking, all the Italians were considered by the British potential enemies. So they had to put them into camps. And some of them, they did. So Valtorta has to try to convince the British that the Italians in Hong Kong would be loyal to the British rule and they will not create any trouble. This is the first. Then secondly, when the Japanese invaded Hong Kong, so technically, the Italians were free because they were allied with the Japanese, and then the British, the Americans, the French, and all the other, they were in trouble. So they were put, all of them, into a camp in Stanley. And the bishop has still this difficult job to mediate with the Japanese invaders. They will listen to him because he was Italian, and fascist Italy was allied with the fascist Japan. But then the fascist Italians stopped to be fascist, and they declared in 1943 they abandoned Japan and Germany, and then they declared the end of the war. So even the Italians became enemies of the Japanese, and then so it was a difficult time. This is why I call Valtorta, Bishop of Defensor Civitatis, means the one who defended, because he tried his best to, in a very, very, very difficult, what to do. He tried to defend the Catholic people and the Catholic missionaries, no matter the personality, where they came from, the nationality, no matter. He tried his best. He also sold his own golds, all the goods that he had as being a bishop, chalices and other stuff, for charity, to give food to the people. It was a very difficult day. Many people died, even of hunger. Many people fly to Macau, but also Macau was very difficult. But Macau at least was out of trouble because there was no war there. So it was a difficult time. It was a difficult time, but partly thanks to this leadership by Valtorta, who was recognized as a credible leader by all missionaries. I mean, it's not because an American missionary, I feel Valtorta is, since he's Italian, he is against me. All missionaries felt that this leadership was the leadership of the church, and that politics was not, but politics played a very, tragic politics and wars. So there's much more we can say about that. And some missionaries were killed, some priests were killed also on those days by this. One or two missionaries, I think, they lost their mind. Clearly, yes, they, a mental breakdown because at least one missionary would. So it was a difficult time because many people will die, etc. Book, yeah. Yes, I think not only, certainly in female letters, and there's a lot of material that is still there to be studied. Also the Salesians, there were many Italian Salesians. The Salesians, they were fortunate enough to be able to receive goods from other countries, all during the war, and then of course they gave to the children they had in their school. So a lot has been done. And some people might have become Catholic because in a time of difficulty you look for God, maybe because they hope to be helped. The motivation always can be mixed, but always respectful. We have to respect any kind of. So there's we can say that at the end the church survived a very difficult time, and after that there was another crisis, of the refugees, and the church was very good, able to answer to that challenges also as well. So I would say that, no one is perfect, but more or less the church was able in Hong Kong to deal with these two emergencies, the war and also the after-war, because the after-war also there was. I guess the time is up.
Yeah.
And Lucia.
Thank you very much for Father Johnny's presentation. 好多謝柯神父嘅講解。其實我哋未完，因為做一個口述歷史嘅一個講述嘅，咁係呢一部分咧係由中文講解嘅。我哋而家開始呢個口述歷史嘅講述部分啦。咁頭先都想解釋翻點解我哋今次 即係第一個嘅講座系列咧，就用咗一個英文嘅，即係邀請一個柯神父啦，用英文嘅講解。咁點解唔係即係香港係全世界最大嘅華人教區，點解唔用即係中文啊咁樣？咁其實即係除咗因為中座外方傳教會嘅即係同香港教區呢個好密切嘅關係之外咧，咁另外咧就係我哋今年唔知大家有冇留意呢？今年嘅10月呢，就係一個特殊傳教月嘅，係教宗即係指定咗呢一個特殊傳教月。咁因為今年係夫志大宗座牧函嘅100週年，咁呢一個宗座牧函呢，亦都叫傳教大憲章。咁所以呢，就係即係傳教對整個教會都係好重要啦。咁所以即係我哋用咗傳教呢個主題嚟做開始，即係3月份即係第一個嘅講座係啦。咁下個月呢，就由夏神父呢就會講返即係教會同即係香港社會嘅一個同埋中國嘅一個更大嘅關係咁樣。咁講返呢個口述歷史嘅講述呢一度啦。咁呢一個計劃呢，就係我哋一個中心天主教研究中心20世紀香港天主教會歷史研究計劃東西匯萃嘅一個項目嚟嘅。咁呢一個項目呢，就包括係由衛奕信勳爵信託基金會贊助。咁我哋已經搞咗喺舊年呢，就有一啲嘅堂區嘅導賞團，咁就去咗元朗啦，同埋錦田啦，仲有九龍嘅一啲堂區。咁呢啲堂區呢，就比較特別呢，就係佢哋係以往一啲傳教嘅比較重要嘅一個地點。咁另外呢，就頭先你哋入場嘅時候，我哋都派發咗一啲小單張。咁亦都係做呢一個介紹嘅。咁嚟緊4月呢，我哋就會再出版一個小冊子，就係講返呢啲比較特殊嘅一啲嘅傳教地點同埋佢哋嘅教堂建築。咁另外一個呢，就係一個口述歷史嘅書籍會出版。咁呢啲冚唪唥都係免費索取嘅，因為係基金會嗰邊贊助。咁即係可以到時候大家都可以喺堂區或者係喺我哋中心度都可以攞到嘅。咁呢個口述歷史嘅項目呢，我哋嘅介紹下呢，就係個受訪者呢，就係一啲神父啦、修女啦同埋教友，即係佢哋會即係可能個年紀比較大啲即係我哋就即係訪問佢，即係佢哋了解香港教會比較即係早期一啲。咁我哋就分咗4大主題嘅，咁就係有社會發展、教會與堂區、東西文化同埋教會嘅女性。咁呢個社會嘅發展係指即係話從受訪者嘅口中，佢可以睇到當時即係佢哋了解到嘅社會，或者睇到嗰個社會嗰個發展嘅環境，即係譬如50、60年代個香港嗰個經濟好即係仲係好貧乏咁樣。咁教會與堂區就係話，即係個堂區嘅發展係點樣啦。咁東西文化就係話即係有啲好多時候天主教或者係基督教都好啦，就係俾人哋當咗係一個洋教。咁呢個洋教咁喺一個華人嘅社會裏邊嗰個自處，或者係傳教士一啲外籍傳教士，佢哋即係喺呢一個環境之下點樣去即係呢一個文化嘅一個融合呢？咁樣。咁另外就係一啲教會嘅女性啦，譬如一啲修女同埋一啲女教友佢哋喺教會裏邊嘅一個貢獻啦。所以今次咧，我哋咧就呢個講述嘅範圍咧，我哋就亦都跟翻配合翻今次3月呢個講座咧，就係用傳教做主題。咁就係有3位嘅外籍傳教士嘅一個訪問。咁咧就但係唔係話淨係得佢哋啦，同埋3位傳教士，亦都唔係話3位咁啱都係神父啦。咁唔係話女性唔好，而係我哋而家仲做緊呢一個即係寫完呢個訪問稿之後咧，都要佢哋嘅同意。咁所以咧，我哋佢哋未同意之前咧，咁我想我哋亦都唔方便講住咁樣啦。咁所以今次係有3位嘅神父嘅內容。咁要 要講翻就係口述歷史嗰個重要性啦。咁點解我哋即係覺得係好重要咧？就係其實我哋每個人都會有口述歷史嘅，即係從爸爸媽媽啊、阿爺阿公啊，咁佢哋會講翻我以前點點點啊咁樣，即係講好多啲俾我哋聽啦。咁其實呢個就係一個口述歷史嘅一個來源咯。咁大概喺上世紀嘅中葉左右啦，咁口述歷史咧就成為一種歷史學嘅分支啦。咁就開始受到更加多嘅即係關注啦，同埋重視。咁可能嘅原因就係有啲科技進步啦，我哋有啲錄音器材啦、錄影啦，咁同埋咧對一啲民間嘅研究又興起啦，咁即係會即係睇到一啲係唔係話平時好即係好高層次一啲嘅人物啊，咁即係咁單純。因為好似喺中國咧，尤其是中國人啦，我哋好多時嘅歷史咧就係皇帝將相。即係都係即係個編年史一個記錄嚟嘅，咁都係講緊皇帝。咁可能啲其實即係咁平民又點咧？咁就係冇咗嘅。咁所以咧口述歷史咧就嗰個重要性就喺呢度，就係佢可以補充翻一啲正史一啲嘅內容。但係當然啦，亦都唔係一個定論，就話佢咁樣講就一定啱嘅。咁呢樣我哋都會注意到。咁但係就話佢可以補充到我哋其他嘅歷史，即係歷史其實都係呢一個學術都係要由唔同嘅一個方式嘅研究裏邊去互相補充嘅。咁首先介紹嘅咧就係馬偉良神父，咁佢係查字典認識香港嘅。咁馬偉良神父咧就係聖母聖心會嘅神父嚟嘅。咁佢呢度有一個生平嘅介紹啦。咁主要咧就係佢係一個教友家庭度出身嘅。咁就好細個都係已經好熱心參與教會啦。咁又做輔祭會啊，又做啲天主教嘅童軍啊。咁到10幾歲嘅時候，佢就開始覺得自己有啲聖召，咁佢就問堂區嘅神父，究竟即係應該要入，即係通常有聖召嘅人就會諗應該入教區嘅修會啊，定係一啲嘅修會團體咧咁樣。咁嗰個神父就同佢講就話其實全世界都有好多地方都係好缺乏神父嘅，咁所以佢就開始佢就入咗即係聖母聖心會啦。sorry。真係先。咁咧佢即係通常咧啲神父即係修會咧都會問你想去邊一個地方？咁其實佢都唔知嘅。咁佢就諗到係亞洲啦咁樣。咁佢對中國嘅歷史都有啲興趣。咁但係到會長派佢嘅時候，就係派咗去香港。嗰陣時佢係唔知香港係咩地方嚟嘅。咁佢話咁查字典啦，因為冇 internet 啊嘛，咁查字典，原來香港就係都係屬於即係中國嘅一部分咁樣啦。咁對一啲唔係講英語嘅傳教士嚟講，佢哋第一樣即係要派去外邊嘅時候，通常第一樣嘢就係要學英文，即係呢個係一個英國傳教即係殖民地啦，咁佢哋學英文。咁佢嚟到香港嘅時候咧，就係去到呢個聖母堂先嘅。咁聖母堂亦都算係佢哋聖母聖心會比較早期嘅一個即係佢哋負責嘅一個堂區啦。咁同埋嗰陣時一啲大陸即係被趕出嚟嘅傳教士，即係佢哋自己嘅修會嘅傳教士，都係去嗰度即係比較聚集於喺嗰度。同埋喺香港，所以佢覺得即係嚟香港都係一個幾好嘅一個地方啦，幾中意。咁佢嚟到嘅時候咧，就聖母堂唔知你哋有冇去過啦？咁喺一個半坡上邊啦。咁嗰陣時連嗰個黃埔花園都未起嘅，黃埔新村都未起嘅。咁所以佢要望到對面北角嗰邊。佢話過咗幾個星期之後咧，已經唔見咗啦，因為已經起樓啊，睇唔到對岸北角嗰邊嘅情況噶啦。咁另外咧就佢又要學廣東話啦，咁佢嘅方法就係話跟一啲青年去多啲旅行啊，去露營啊，咁即係同佢哋打成一片。咁同埋佢哋好多時咧傳教士都會佢哋好認真學呢個語言，咁佢哋就會同即係喺身邊嘅人講就話，如果我講錯咗，你就要話翻俾我聽。 咁呢個都係我訪問其他嘅受訪者嘅時候，佢哋都會有咁講，即係因為佢哋覺得呢個好重要嘅。如果唔係好明你哋講乜嘢，即係唔會好自己做本位咯。咁譬如佢都係佢有講過就話，好似堂區同埋同居，我好中意我嘅同居。即係開始講嘅時候咁人哋啲教友就你好中意同居，即係呢啲音調嘅唔同咧，其實就係影響幾大。咁佢學咗廣東話之後，其實就派咗去一個其實係好困難嘅一個堂區，就係調景嶺嗰邊啊。嗰邊咧就係啲大陸嘅國民黨嘅軍人啊、家眷啊，嗰陣時就係聚集，英國政府就將佢哋擁晒去嗰個山頭嗰度聚集。咁佢哋講咩？有湖南話啊、四川話啊、上海話，全部都係好難聽嘅。咁所以佢去到嗰度服務咧，都係好辛苦。咁佢自己就話：啲人同我辦告解嘅時候，佢即係話天主保佑。根本冇辦法，其實都唔係好聽得明。咁咧就係啦，咁所以咧就但係佢就講調景嶺嗰啲村民咧就係好好嘅。嗰個地方咧嗰陣時候咧夜不閉戶，唔使鎖門嘅夜晚黑。咁同埋佢去探訪啲教友嘅時候，經過咧就可以去就可以入去飲杯茶一齊傾偈，就唔需要即係又要敲門啊，又要登記啊，即係好似我哋而家大家都知啦，你去一個地方都要登記你個名啊，或者你真係即係驚你白撞啊咁。嗰陣時候嗰段時間調景嶺即係嗰個村民嘅關係係好好。咁不過當然啦，教友嘅人數就唔係話太多咁啦。咁到後來調景嶺要拆遷啦，到97年，咁佢就要負責埋，就更加辛苦，就要負責埋將軍澳嘅。咁變咗咧，佢調景嶺啲教友就話：我哋仲未拆㗎，我哋仲喺度㗎，你要照顧我哋。而將軍澳嗰啲教友就話：我哋新嚟嘅，我哋好需要你啊咁樣。所以佢就要兩頭走。咁調景嶺係個山坡上邊嘛，所以佢成日咧就要走400級樓梯。咁樣。咁跟住開完個彌撒，又要走翻去將軍澳咁樣，係啦。咁呢段時間其實係都幾辛苦，同埋可以睇得到佢即係對堂區嗰個即係好重視咯，對教友好重視咯。咁之後咧，咁就佢係做咗20年啦，咁就之後咧就係擔任咗省會長。咁嗰陣時咧又要去台灣啊、去內蒙啊、去蒙古啊呢啲咁嘅地方，即係要去新加坡啊咁去視察啦。咁之後佢再翻嚟嘅時候咧，又咁啱聖母堂又有空位有呢個空缺啦，咁所以佢又可以翻去聖母堂嗰度做神父啦、主任司鐸。咁佢又好開心嘅。咁我哋睇到最尾嗰項啦，就係其實因為佢嗰個傳教工作即係咁好啦，咁係俾比利時嘅國王頒授咗一個勳章添㗎，咁即係都係一個好表揚佢啦。咁我諗最重要嘅一樣咧，其實佢即係作為傳教士，佢自己睇到，或者我哋自己做教友可以即係都可以反思下咧，就係佢覺得要認識一個傳教嘅歷史，咁咧就係我哋即係自己係中國人，我哋又應該都要認識中國嘅教會嘅歷史咯。咁佢有提到就話佢帶一啲教友去朝聖嘅時候咧，好多時嘅反應就係話路德好啊，羅馬好啊，咁樣默主哥耶好啊。但係當佢話我帶你哋去內蒙嘅時候，就話都冇嘢玩嘅咁樣，係啦。咁所以佢就話我哋係去朝聖，我哋唔係去玩啊。即係同埋講到內蒙嘅時候，其實佢哋都唔知道內蒙有啲咩咯。咁其實內蒙古即係中國嘅一部分啦。咁就當地都係即係聖母聖心會佢哋比較早期嘅落腳嘅地點嚟嘅。咁嗰個地方係好凍啦，因為好北啦嚇，咁可能係-20度啊咁嘅環境。咁可以想像當年佢哋最早有會士入去嘅時候係1856年左右啦。咁嗰個環境佢哋係仲辛苦咯，即係佢哋可以即係啲傳教士為咗我哋中國人 咁樣去服務、去犧牲咁樣。咁所以佢自己覺得咧，就係我哋係應該要認識我哋自己嘅一個中國嘅一個傳教歷史。咁嚟緊啦，2022年咧，唔知大家知唔知咧，就會有奧運會咧，就喺河北嗰邊有個地方叫崇禮縣嘅，嗰邊會有啲舉行，有啲項目有啲舉行嘅。咁就係但係崇禮縣其實以前咧叫西灣子，咁西灣子咧係天主教會裏邊一個，亦都係比較重要嘅一個地方啊。咁所以如果你到時可能有興趣去奧運會嗰度睇下嘅話，其實都應該要即係認識下西灣子或者而家宣化啦嗰邊嘅情況啊，咁樣了解下呢個地方咯，係啦。咁呢個就係馬偉良神父嘅一個訪問。好啦，到第二位咧就係恩保德神父。咁恩神父咧，可能大家都好即係好認識佢啊，好認識佢，因為佢好即係傳教，佢係做咗好多嘢，好多活動啊。咁大家都知，但係就唔知即係之前佢其實佢唔係好中意中國嘅喎，好抗拒喎。唔知你哋知唔知？咁咧原來咧佢自己咧就話自己好怪嘅。因為我哋有聖召嘅時候，好多時就係話我諗到要做神父，我要讀新，咁咧就跟住就會諗到我不如去外國嗰度即係去傳教啦咁樣。佢同我哋講咧就係佢自己好怪，佢係調翻轉，佢係首先咧有一個念頭就好想去外國出咗去先，咁然後咧佢又諗到要出去，咁我要讀新先方便噶嘛，咁跟住佢先諗到要做神父，即係佢就係話佢自己形容佢自己好怪，就係調翻轉嚟嘅呢個方向。咁咧點解佢話佢好抗拒中國咧？咁有一段古，其實唔知好似我自己都覺得好似比較少，佢自己比較少講出嚟。咁佢最初認識，即係好多時佢哋即係外方傳教認識一啲地方，咁佢唔係話認識中國嗰啲先嘅，佢係佢嗰陣時係諗住係美國夏威夷嗰陣時叫火爐啦咁嗰啲啦，咁佢話佢好唔中意中國嘅，咁點解咧？就係原來佢哋嗰陣時食飯咧，收會食飯就要唔準出聲噶嘛，咁就有一個人咧就負責讀書。即係你哋食飯嘅時候，咁有人讀書，咁繼續聽啦咁樣。咁佢咧就要有一本書就叫做在中國33年，咁係一位意大利神父寫嘅。咁嗰個意大利神父咧就後來做咗主教添。咁就係講起中國嗰段時間咁樣。咁佢就話啲名又唔識讀，啲地方又唔識讀。講完之後讀完之後根本都呢個係好人係壞人，佢完全都唔識分。所以佢好唔中意，咁到佢讀嘅時候咧，咁佢就蠱惑啦。佢咧就讀下咧就跳咗去最尾嗰頁，咁跟住就話俾人聽讀完咯咁樣。咁點知咧個院長咧就知道佢蠱惑，咁就話唔該你從第一頁再從頭讀起。咁所以佢就係即係覺得哎呀好憎啊！即係又要我讀呢本書悶，佢直頭話係悶到抽筋嘅一本書。所以佢就開始就係覺得好唔中意中國。咁又係啦，會長又係問你哋即係想第時去邊度傳教啊？咁佢嘅志願都係亞洲，不過佢就講係日本，第二咧就係印度。咁但係到即係嗰個即係個結果出嚟嘅時候，即係公佈嘅時候咧，就原來派去香港。咁香港又係香港係啲咩地方？其實佢自己唔中意嘅，佢唔想嘅。咁但係啲同學就話咁咪好咯。即係佢哋啲同學其實好多都係好想出去外方傳教啊嘛。佢話如果唔係你唔出去嘅話，可能你就要再留翻喺修院度再讀多3年傳教歷史。咁所以有啲同學就覺得幾好啊！你有得去香港好過冇得去，有啲人冇得去。咁另外咧就係佢阿媽自己咧，其實就唔係好想佢出去嘅，即係反對嘅。即係你做咗神父就算啦，留喺度咁我都可以成日見到你。但係你去咗香港咁遠，真係見唔到咁樣啦。咁另外又令到佢自己好反感嘅咧，就係佢嚟香港嘅時候咧。咁嗰個年代咧，佢58年嚟香港，嗰個年代即係搭飛機好貴啦。咁佢就係要搭船，搭20幾日船，佢係會暈船浪啊！ 所以佢係好唔開心，即係成件事，即係由嗰陣時食飯到開始派佢去，佢都係好唔開心嘅。所以即係嚟到香港嘅時候，即係你可以想像啦。咁嚟到香港嘅時候，當一晚咧，佢好記得。咁好多有幾位受訪者嘅時候都係有講嘅，就係嚟到香港就係夜晚黑嚟嘅。咁佢嚟到香港就黑咪掹啦，咁啊見到哇個山上邊好多建築物。即係佢突然間諗到啊，呢個好似馬槽喎咁樣，即係好似意大利人砌嗰啲馬槽啊，好多嘢喺度。咁之後呢，咁佢就又係學英文啦。咁啊諗住，即係佢嚟香港之前就學英文，就諗住又係有用啦，英國殖民地啊嘛咁樣。但係嚟到之後，佢發現呢，其實英文呢係一個小圈子嘅語言。即係你係要同政府打交道，同啲官打交道，你先有用。其他嘅一般人呢，就係你一世都可以唔使用英文嘅，即係你唔同啲官打交道，你咪唔使用咯咁樣。咁真正令到佢開始嗱，大家而家其實知道嘅恩神父呢，就係好中意中國，好想做中國人，但係。即係呢一個改變係幾時開始呢？就係真係大公會議之後啦，即係教會推動呢個本地化嘅時候，咁佢係即係覺得啊係喎，我應該要即係幫呢個香港嘅地方呢一個地方去即係做一個本地化咁樣。咁嗰陣時佢識嘅英文呢，佢就係喺佢喺聖瑪加利大堂嗰度附近啦，嗰度服務啦。咁嗰邊有好多間學校嘅，咁佢就開始同啲學生即係用英文嚟交談啊、溝通啊咁樣，即係同佢哋認識啦咁樣，開始佢嘅傳教。咁當然啦，我哋自己中國人咧，見到佢都會其實即係佢自己幾想做中國人都好，我哋見到佢都會話佢係鬼佬，而佢自己都知道人哋都仲係會覺得佢係鬼佬，即係你幾想做你都做唔到噶嘛，因為始終就係你唔係。咁但係即係佢自己即係好我覺得係佢自己好深入去呢一個文化咯。即係佢可以了解嗱，頭先就係講馬神父嗰度可能講就係話學語言嗰個難度，即係講嗰個難度。咁佢咧係去到咧就係嗰個中文嘅即係更深層嘅一個思考啊！佢會覺得中文同意大利文啦或者英文啦，佢哋即係喺個邏輯即係思維上面都係唔同嘅。咁咧就譬如有啲嘢係譯唔到出嚟啊！即係我哋所講嘅，佢就係講話嗰個 concept， 中國有嘅，可能歐洲人冇嘅，或者歐洲人有嘅，中國係冇嘅咁樣。咁佢舉咗一個例就係話 I'm a man， 咁佢問佢個中文老師，咁啊老師就話我係人啦，或者我係一個男人。咁如果係 I am a man 同 I am a woman， 咁啊大家可以容易理解啦。我係一個男人，我係一個女人。咁如果 I am a person， 咁佢再問個老師 I am a person， 咁佢就話個老師話咪我係人咯咁樣。咁呢個又係我係人，嗰個又係我係人，即係其實有啲即係佢講唔到，即係嗰個差別喺邊啊嚇。咁所以咧就佢覺得呢一個就係話即係個兩個言語同文化之間一個差別性喺度。咁所以佢自己咧好中意中國咧，就係譬如佢講到有一樣嘢就係覺得係歐洲冇，就係話修身齊家治國平天下呢一個 concept 啦，呢一個概念啦。佢話意大利係講唔到出嚟，即係冇辦法有一個對應嘅一個翻譯出嚟啊。咁佢仲用到咧係，佢話如果係用我哋中國人有啲因果論嗰個論調嚟諗咧，就仲更加正。佢就話，因為你要修身，你先可以齊到家，咁你要齊到家先可以治到國，治到國先可以平到天下，係啦。咁即係呢一個係一個即係有一個因果關係喺度，係啦。咁調翻轉，譬如佢問老師咩叫 logic，咁老師話邏輯咯。咁 其實係冇解釋到乜嘢嚟嘅咁樣咯。係啊，咁所以佢自己係睇到呢一個中西個文化上面好大嘅一個差別。但係即係其實佢而家嚟到中國即係香港都60幾年啦，咁即係俾我哋有啲人可能都年紀，即係我哋都未出世咁樣，係啦。咁可以睇到佢對呢個文化同埋對呢一個國家嘅人民，即係嘅一個即係熱愛咯嚇，就係咁。咁最後一位咧就係江天文神父啦。咁頭先我哋講到口述歷史個重要性啦，就係因為有啲神父我哋聯絡嘅時候，我負責嗰部分係神父嘅，有其他同事負責修女啊或者係教友啦嘅時候咧，其實嗰段時間已經係有幾位神父都去世，咁有啲可能已經係病重，即係接受唔到訪問。咁另外亦都有啲佢哋可能怕醜啦，或者謙虛啦，咁就即係唔想即係接受訪問咁樣。咁呢一個其實我哋就覺得幾可惜咯，因為你講嘅嘢其實留翻落嚟嘅時候，即係對大家對後一代，我哋講緊係歷史傳承咯，即係對後一輩即係新嘅一啲教友或者係啲年青人嚟講，佢哋會即係從佢哋嘅訪問裏邊認識翻我哋自己嘅教會做緊啲咩呢？50、60年代做緊啲咩？70年代做緊啲咩呢？咁如果佢哋唔講呢，就會冇咗呢啲咁細微嘅枝節啦。即係我哋可能睇公教報睇乜嘢，即係都會可能係上層教區上層嘅一啲牧函，即係個主教嘅牧函咁樣，即係佢哋落嚟。但係反而一啲好生活上邊嘅一啲嘅細微嘅嘢，其實可能係啲會令到一般嘅人更加覺得原來呢個教會係去服務人嘅咁樣，即係嗰個重要性喺呢一度咯。咁阿江神父，我哋係喺佢應該係2017年嘅時候係訪問佢嘅，咁佢係2018年就係猝死啦。咁江神父咧就係馬尼羅會嘅神父啦。咁佢最初都係佢自己係對中國嘅歸化係比較有興趣嘅，咁亦都係即係因為又係要讀啲傳教歷史啦。咁佢屋企人咧就係佢父母都係德國人嚟嘅，咁所以佢即係細個都又要講德文啦，又講英文啦，咁即係佢自己自細對語文都係有啲興趣啦，所以嚟到要學廣東話啊咁嗰啲，即係佢都可以即係可以即係可以 manage 到啦。咁佢嚟嘅時候咧，其實嗰陣時咧都仲係行緊舊禮嘅，即係要用拉丁文嘅。咁佢一邊要學中文，另外一邊咧開彌撒嘅時候又要用翻拉丁文。咁到後來咧就再改變嘅時候就係話有傳道員係可以幫佢講道理嘅。咁啊到後來梵二之後啦，咁啊即係本地化之後就全部就可以用晒中文嚟開彌撒啦咁。咁佢主要咧，佢自己喺馬利諾嘅時候咧，佢自己都有讀過生物學嘅，咁所以佢嚟嘅時候咧，即係會喺學校嗰度負責啦，做。咁嗰陣時馬利諾修會咧係有13間中小學嘅，咁喺九龍東九龍嗰邊係比較多咧，因為嗰陣時係寮屋區啦、貧民區啦，咁所以係佢哋喺嗰帶咧係好多服務嘅。咁最初即係除咗話教育方面啦，咁佢自己有一段時間咧係翻去自己嘅修會咧，就係負責正義和平組嘅。咁所以嗰陣時，除咗話即係佢自己開始領悟到咧，就係話即係梵二之後啦，其實就唔止話我哋要拯救個靈魂，仲要拯救埋個生命。即係佢就會開始係好重視呢個正義和平呢個工作啦。咁喺教會裏邊個教書啦，咁佢除咗話即係俾 啲老師好大嘅自由度去即係用佢哋自己覺得好嘅方式嚟教之外咧，咁佢哋都會放咗學咧就會俾老師，即係譬如你專長畫畫，咁咧就俾佢哋開一個畫畫班，咁即係唔同老師有啲唔同嘅興趣啦，去教學生。咁佢自己咧原來咧識啲叫做咩佢識整發射台添啊，業餘嘅發射台啊，所以識整原子粒收音機啊，都好犀利。咁呢樣佢又係愛嚟做一個課外活動去教佢啲學生啦。咁所以佢啲學生有個咧就即係後來就話俾佢聽，即係好感謝佢，就係話因為你教曉咗我呢一樣，即係呢個係一個興趣，但係到後來咧就佢呢個學生就做咗一個工程師。即係佢哋嘅教育都係做一個啟發性咯，即係對學生嚟講。咁同埋當年其實都唔差嘅，因為佢哋佢話第一班嘅學生咧就50年之後都仲係有聯絡嘅，佢哋都仲有聯絡。咁啊嗰班佢做 Form 5嘅班主任嗰班學生，咁咧就嗰陣時仲要係全部都英文合格嘅。即係考會考啊，咁其實係唔難，係唔簡單啊，因為嗰個年代其實都係好深啦咁樣，咁所以同啲學生嘅關係好好。咁另外咧就係話好多時我哋教會嘅傳教咧由學校開始啦，咁佢自己嗰個傳教嘅方式，佢就覺得即係唔可以係壓迫啦，即係唔可以話啊你領咗洗入咗我哋就可能會好啲，咁佢要覺得係心甘情願嘅。咁嗰陣時咧就係反而係啲父母咧，佢要面對嘅係父母嘅問題，因為一啲家長咧，佢哋覺得啊，如果我啲仔女領咗洗之後咧，第時我死咗，佢就唔會嚟埋葬我啊、拜祭我啊，唔會，佢哋會擔心呢樣。咁咧，所以即係要令到父母，但係佢哋又好想佢哋可以入到呢啲教英文嘅學校喎，即係咁樣先可以即係喺個社會階梯度爬上去啊嘛，咁樣。咁所以即係呢個就係佢哋要面對嘅一個問題啦。咁當然佢會覺得即係要慢慢去讓啲父母係安心之下，先至即係幫佢啲學生去領洗咁樣咯。咁當然亦都係自願㗎啦。咁另外或者而家其實佢都提到一樣嘢，我哋而家嘅人更加要即係要警醒咧，就係佢覺得香港人即係好中意食嘢，好浪費，好唔環保啊！一個大餐可能用成1000隻碟啊！佢話香港人真係越嚟越肥。佢話以前係啦，即係呢個比較就係以前即係可能年代又唔同啦，又窮困啲啦。個個人都瘦嘅，而家咧就大家就食好多嘢就變咗好肥，即係糖尿病都多咗。咁我諗可能呢個亦都係我哋可以即係從佢哋嘅口述歷史裏邊，即係我哋反省翻我哋自己嘅生活狀況咯。咁另外咧就係一啲嘅民主思想啦，咁你都即係始終喺美國出身都係即係比較講民主啊。頭先講過話佢即係參與正義和平啊咁樣，咁佢都會覺得即係喺教育上邊可以幫佢哋潛移默化啦。咁但係始終即係可能係殖民地啦，但係即係大家舒服慣啦，同埋英國人就好識用殖民地嚟賺錢啦。咁喺人權方面即係有先進嘅，咁但係即係都係要慢慢去即係培養呢一個嘅意識啦。咁喺教育嗰度係可以即係做得到啦。咁呢個大概就係我哋今日嘅呢個口述歷史嘅講述。咁就係希望下次咧就會有其他嘅一啲嘅受訪者嘅內容可以同大家分享。咁喺結束之前啦，咁我哋咧就再提醒翻，我哋下一次咧就係夏神父會做呢一個演講嘅，咁就會講翻呢100年嘅歷史啦。咁係會將由國家或者係 社會發生嘅大事嚟扣翻入去教會當時嘅嗰個反應，而唔係話調翻轉話通常就係教會發生咩事咁樣。所以我覺得係好可以值得期待啦。咁同埋阿夏神父係檔案處嘅主任，咁你都知可能好多秘密可以佢會講出嚟，係啦。咁到時咁今日咧，我哋外邊咧就有啲書籍係可以免費索取嘅。咁如果大家想奉獻嘅都可以攞一個即係登記自己寄支票過嚟啦。我哋今日就唔會收即係現錢啊咁樣係啦。咁同埋柯神父，如果你哋有興趣購買本書，都可以喺出邊登記嘅。咁我哋睇下夏神父仲有冇啲嘢其他嘢要講？田神父，我哋呢一個成個計劃其實咧就係有3位主要負責嘅神父，咁就係夏神父啦、田神父啦，同埋阿譚永蘭神父嘅，咁就即係佢哋負責晒呢一個公開講座同埋研討會。殷神父嘅補充。
關於殷寶德神父，我知道佢同夏基龍神父一段時間去越南嗰邊做傳教嘅呢件事咧，好少人知道咯。所以咧，我覺得係值得訪問夏神父同埋殷寶德神父關於佢嘅。
好，譚神父咧？
其實今次我覺得係幾好啊，咁都係介紹。雖然我自己都係一個傳教士啊，咁特別同第一位嘅係馬偉亮神父咧，我好熟悉嘅。咁即係睇到佢嗰個傳教嘅過程，同我咧就係又好唔同嘅嚇。咁佢好奇怪啊！查字典啊，查字典都唔知香港喺邊度啊！其實咧就係我哋傳教士啊，即係按照我哋修會嘅規矩㗎咁樣咧，我哋唔係揀一個地方㗎嘛，我哋多數係要聽會長係點樣會安排我哋。咁咧，所以咧，我哋嚟到呢個地方咧，我諗好多傳教士都係一樣啊，唔係因為我哋自己嘅興趣嘅，而係嗰個修會嘅安排咁樣啦。咁慢慢咧就係嚟適應嗰個地方咧。咁最有趣嘅咧，咁就殷寶德神父啊，咁本來好憎中國啊，咁又好憎嗰啲傳教士嘅報導咁樣啦。咁我諗咧，我哋都有好多相同嘅地方嘅咁樣嘅嚇。咁所以我覺得佢始終咧就係個人嘅體驗啊、經驗咧，就係都好重要嘅。不過咧就係主要咧，我哋嚟到一個新嘅地方咧，都為我哋嚟講係一個新嘅世界開始嘅。咁認識啲新嘅嘢咁樣啦。咁變咗咧即係個過程啊嚇。即係今次啱啱即係福音講無花果樹啊嚇，咁都有好密切嘅關係咁樣啦。我覺得佢今日咧就係好感恩啦，就係好豐富嘅分享。多謝大家。
頭先公教部咧做咧，佢就話訪問下我關於今次嘅計劃係點樣，即係呢個20世紀香港天主教嘅歷史研究。咁呢個計劃我哋係同公教部同檔案處一齊合作啦。咁但係我個人就認為，其實歷史嘅研究本身呢，唔係淨係去發掘一啲事件，或甚至乎一啲人物，而係當我哋研究呢個歷史嘅時候，我哋係一種醒覺嘅過程。我哋由於聽到過去嘅一啲事件、一啲人物嘅生平，我哋醒覺到，即係佢哋承傳俾我哋嘅係啲咩嘢？ 即係今日我哋能夠坐喺呢度，生活喺呢一度，我哋係承繼咗好多前人留低俾我哋嘅嘢。咁究竟前人係用乜嘢方式留低咗啲咩嘢俾我哋呢？係要我哋一個醒覺到歷史裏邊咧嘅一啲事情上，我哋先至會知道嘅。否則話，其實我哋好模糊咁樣去生活。所以嗰個歷史嘅一個研究係呢一種咁嘅醒覺，而呢個醒覺過程當中咧，係我哋就會去睇下點樣去效法翻前人嘅一啲做嘢，拎到佢哋一啲智慧，然後我哋亦都要反省我哋有啲咩做唔到嘅嘢。咁呢個都係我即係諗到，即係關於今次點解我哋會做呢一個咁樣研究計劃嘅意思喺度嘅。咁剛才律師都提到好多關於我哋，譬如話要做個口述歷史啦。咁呢個口述歷史本身就係為咗去揾翻出一啲我哋周圍嘅人，或者之前嘅前人佢哋所做過嘅嘢咧，等作為我哋一個模範，作為我哋榜樣，作為我哋個反省嘅一個資料，一個機會咁。其實我哋而家係咪一個問答嘅時期啊？一個時間啊？佢哋應該問你嘅喎，係嘛？
應該都冇乜大嘅問題啦，係咪？嚇，係。
佢係咪後尾去咗啲工廠度做嘢㗎？嚇，佢有冇提到喺口述歷史？
係啊，係啊。係啊，佢係有喺工廠度做嘅，我都記得佢以前講過。咁係啊，係啊，因為其實佢好忙嘅，好難約佢嘅。咁我哋嗰次約佢嘅時候咧，佢都一講完佢就話我哋時間都夠㗎咯，咁同埋因為殷神父有好多段落咧，我哋即係我諗係大家都好知嘅，咁所以我哋就未必話即係再重複落去啦，即係喺其他嘅報道啊或者文章上面都見到係啦。咁主要都係就翻我哋訪問嘅時候，佢可以講到嘅一啲地方咁樣啦。
剛才呢個問題咧，其實係我哋要了解。大概60年代、70年代嘅時候呢，喺整個世界個社會氣氛係好特別嘅。60年代差唔多度度都係啲學生運動，仲有啲嬉皮士，即係反傳統嗰種咁樣嘅方式生活啊，然後要揾一個即係出路啊咁。咁所以尤其是60年代教會有梵蒂岡第二次大公會議之後呢，嗰個開放教會嗰個生活嘅方式呢，令到其實一方面走咗好多神父修女還俗嘅，即係呢個佢認為我哋唔需要以呢個咁嘅身份去喺教會裏邊存在，即係我哋本身作為一個基督徒就已經得啦。咁所以其實係好多當時係好多咁樣嘅情況，但係亦都有另外一啲呢，係繼續喺教會裏邊，但係呢，想投入喺社會裏邊，投入喺社會就同普通嘅教徒或者普通嘅世俗嘅人一樣咁樣生活，但係呢，係抱住一個修道人咁樣嘅心去生活嘅，咁所以就出現咗好多啲工人嘅神父，咁佢哋個用意就係在於話，係要投入喺社會裏邊，因為點解呢？因為梵二之前個教會呢，係喺教會裏邊嘅神職人員呢，係飄飄然在上嘅，好可能其實今日都慢慢會有咁樣嘅情況出現嘅。咁但係60年代、70年代嘅時候呢，就想話一反呢個咁樣嘅，即係喺雲端咁樣生活。 又落翻嚟落地喺呢個社會裏邊，所以咧就產生咗呢一樣嘢。
好，咁我哋今日嘅講座就完畢啦。咁希望你哋下個月再嚟呢個參加我哋嘅下個月4月。